From Bob being eaten alive to the flayed victims transforming into merged monster, here are the darkest moments in Stranger Things that you don't remember. The hospital scene in Season 3 is disturbing because it focuses on the loss of physical control before death actually happens. The infected patients are not unconscious or already dead when the process begins. They're still moving and responding to their surroundings. From the outside, they look sick rather than dangerous, which makes the situation harder to immediately understand or react to. As the infection progresses, their bodies begin to break down from the inside. Skin stretches and their physical form slowly collapses. This isn't presented as a sudden transformation or a violent attack, instead it's gradual and uncomfortable, emphasizing that their bodies are failing while they're still inside them. They simply reach a point where their bodies can no longer hold their shape. In Season 2, Bob Newby slowly becomes an important part of the group even though he has no real connection to the supernatural events happening in Hawkins at the start. He isn't a fighter or someone with special knowledge about the Upside Down. For most of the season, Bob's role is practical and grounded. He supports Joyce and tries to help in ways that make sense to him without fully understanding how dangerous the situation really is. During the escape from the Hawkins lab, Bob ends up playing a crucial role. He figures out how to override the lab security system, which allows Joyce, Will, Mike, and the others to move through the building and reach an exit. Instead of leaving with them, Bob stays behind to keep the doors open, knowing that something dangerous is still inside the lab. As Bob finally runs toward the exit, he sees Joyce waiting for him. He slows down for a brief moment, the Demodogs catch up to him before he can escape, and he's killed just seconds after, making sure the rest of the group gets out. In Season 2, Will becomes partially possessed by the Mind Flayer, which turns his body into a kind of surveillance tool. The creature uses Will to see and hear everything the group is doing without Will being able to stop it. What makes the situation worse is that Will is fully aware when the Mind Flayer is present. He can feel it taking over, and he understands that when it's in control, he can even feel pain that the Mind Flayer gets, as when scientists from Hawkins' lab put fire on the Vine and underground tunnels, Will immediately feel pain and collapses to the ground screaming in agony. And he was the only reason whole Hawkins' lab was under attack by the Demodogs. That's why whole team decide to put Will to sleep and tie him up in cabin outside the Joyce's houses and tries to communicate with them. That's where Will, even in control of the Mind Flayer, tries to help them by revealing information through Morse code. During the exorcism, the group tries to force the Mind Flayer out by overheating Will, since they've learned that the creature is weakened by heat. The process is rough and uncontrolled. Will is physically restrained, screaming and clearly in pain, while the Mind Flayer speaks through him. His body is no longer fully his, and his voice is literally being used to threaten and manipulate the people trying to help him. Barb dies early in Season 1 and is treated very differently from most character deaths in the show. After going to Steve's house with Nancy, Barb stays outside by the pool while Nancy goes inside to be with Steve. Barb is clearly uncomfortable at the party, both socially and emotionally, and removes herself from the situation without making a big scene. While sitting alone, Barb cuts her hand on a broken beer bottle left near the pool. It's a small ordinary injury, and at the time it doesn't seem important. However, the blood is enough to attract a creature from the Upside Down. With no one else around, Barb is suddenly attacked and pulled into the Upside Down through the pool without any warning or chance for her to react. In the Upside Down, Barb is injured and attacked by the Demogorgon. The show doesn't linger on the violence or show her death directly. Instead, it leaves large gaps in what the audience sees, only later confirming what happened when Eleven finds Barb's body in the Upside Down. By avoiding graphic detail, the show makes her death feel quieter and more unsettling. Chrissy's death in Season 4 is disturbing largely because it doesn't initially register as a dangerous situation. She isn't investigating anything supernatural or putting herself in harm's way. At that point, she's a normal high school student dealing with private issues, none of which are visible to the people around her. When she goes to Eddie's trailer, the interaction is awkward but calm, and there's no clear sign that anything bad is about to happen. Once Vecna targets her, Chrissy is pulled into a mental vision that isolates her completely. In this space, she's alone and forced to confront distorted memories and fears with no way to call for help. At the same time, in the real world, her body becomes unresponsive. Eddie can see that something is wrong, but he has no context for what's happening or how to stop it. From the outside, the situation escalates quickly without explanation. Chrissy's death itself is slow. Her body is lifted into the air, her limbs bend unnaturally, and her jaw breaks before she dies. The violence is explicit, but it's presented without spectacle. There is no fight. Her body is treated as an object being manipulated rather than as a person actively resisting. Behind Vecna's terrifying presence has always been a scared child, Henry Creel. If you really think about it, he was always misunderstood and left alone, which led to everything that went wrong throughout Stranger Things. When Henry was just 11 years old, he stumbled across an unknown scientist with a briefcase who was running for his life from someone. We see Henry for the first time not just as a normal kid, but as a very kind one who simply wanted to help that person. However, because the scientist was so scared, he shot Henry's hand. In self-defense, Henry had to kill the scientist. That alone was disturbing, but the story goes even further. Henry opens the briefcase the scientist was protecting and finds a strange stone inside it, originating from the abyss. Upon touching the stone, some particles entered Will's blood through the gunshot wound from earlier. This is when Henry makes first contact with the Mind Flayer, and from that moment on, nothing was ever the same for Henry. In the first shadow, we see Henry as a lonely child with no friends. Even when he finally makes one friend, both that friend and her father end up getting badly hurt. Later, we see how Henry's own mother sends him to Dr. Brenner, where he's experimented on, mentally abused, and forced to carry out dirty work for him. Eventually, Henry brutally kills his parents and his sister, an act that likely had a significant impact on Henry's mental state deep down, because we know from his memories that Henry was capable of confronting his past in the cave, where we can clearly see despair and regret on his face for everything that happened. In the end, during the final battle, we see Vecna get completely overpowered by Eleven and Will, getting pierced by a massive tooth of the Mind Flayer. After the gang defeats the Mind Flayer as well, everyone gathers around Vecna as memories flash through their minds. Joyce, who was deeply affected by Vecna's actions, snaps in anger. She swings her axe at Vecna's head multiple times, finally chopping it off. It is a brutal end to a great villain, one who was deeply disturbed at his core. Max's situation in Season 4 is disturbing because the show avoids turning it into a clean rescue moment. Vecna's attack is not stopped in time to prevent the damage, her arms and legs are broken, her eyes are destroyed. When Eleven intervenes by restarting Max's heart, it doesn't reverse what's already happened, it only prevents her from dying at that exact moment. What follows is where the scene becomes more uncomfortable. Max doesn't regain consciousness, and there's no indication that she's aware of her surroundings. She doesn't respond to her friends or family, and there's no immediate sign of recovery. Doctors later explain that her mind is effectively gone, leaving her body alive but without any clear presence behind it. The show doesn't frame this outcome as a victory. There is no emotional release or sense that the situation has been resolved. Max surviving doesn't bring relief to the people around her, instead it creates a different kind of loss. In Season 4, Stranger Things reveals what really happened inside Hawkins National Laboratory years before the main events of the show. The children there, including Eleven, were part of a secret program where they were tested for telekinetic abilities under Dr. Brenner's supervision. Henry Creel, later known as One, was the first and most powerful subject. Unlike the other children, he was fully aware of how the lab controlled them. After gaining Eleven's trust, he convinces her to remove a tracking device called Soteria that limits his powers. Once free, Henry turns on the lab. He kills the guards and then systematically eliminates every other test subject in a controlled, intentional way. The massacre shows that he doesn't see the other children as victims like himself, he views them as obstacles. Eleven eventually confronts him. Using her powers, she defeats Henry by opening a gate that sends him into another dimension. Instead of killing him, this act transforms him, eventually leading to the creation of Vecna and the Upside Down. We see Billy as an aggressive brother who bullies his sister Max, but underneath he's just a broken person who believes everything can be solved with anger. Even in his final moments when he's controlled by the Mind Flayer, he does everything he can to harm the group, going after Eleven under its command. But everything changes when Eleven shows him a memory of his mother, how he smiled and told her the wave was 7 feet long. In that moment, Billy regains control and turns against the Mind Flayer's giant meat monster to save everyone. He uses every last bit of strength to hold it back, but in the end, he dies without asking for forgiveness. Max is left devastated, crying for her brother. These were the most disturbing moments in Stranger Things. If you want more breakdowns like this, click the video next.